Hello and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you to everybody who liked, shared and subscribed. I'm here to bring you a little update on what Newcastle are looking for in the remainder of the transfer window and their current squad going into the Aston Villa game. The place to start is Tino Livramento, Newcastle's latest summer signing, their third major summer signing. I appreciate that there's a little bit of questioning as to the logic behind it with the money spent on a player that on paper Newcastle don't necessarily need. But I think that they've changed their tactic with this. I think Newcastle have looked at Tino Livramento as a player who they want long term, who they've really liked for a long time. On paper, you know, you might say that Newcastle don't need a right back because they have Kieran Trippier, and they may need a left back to sort of add the balance to the squad. That was certainly the message that they gave out that they were looking for. This keenness to get Livramento and the sort of changing of understanding what Kieran Trippier's role is in the squad. So Trippier's 32. He's not going to play every game of the Champions League this season. That's just a fact. He'll need to be replaced in those games with somebody who can adequately come in and have the same impact as him. He's the player that's set the standard at the club since he arrived. He was the first signing, and everything about him has been really crucial to how Newcastle have operated. So they've looked at that and thought, when he's not there next season, in particular in terms of tactically on the pitch, his link up with Miguel Almiron on the right, and how Almiron's games come on because he's had somebody who's so high up on the pitch next to him. That's, I think, part of the thinking as to why they've acted on Livramento now. If you take another example of how they wanted a number 6 in midfield to replace or to allow Bruno Guimaraes to get up the pitch and impact games more, the signing of Sandro Tonali doesn't automatically do that. But what Tonali brings, as he proved at the weekend against Fiorentina, is that Newcastle, when Bruno isn't there, Newcastle can still have that same impetus in midfield, still press as well, still have as much guile in midfield and tactical nous in midfield as Bruno offers, but perhaps not quite as flashy, and that's what Tonali brings. But that same level of intensity is there, and that's what Newcastle lacked last season when Bruno wasn't there. And that's a huge reason why they didn't win a game when he was indeed absent. And I think they kind of see a similar sort of importance to Trippier, and I think that's why they've acted on Livramento. A lot of good things I've heard from people around Chelsea at the time that Livramento was there. It was his attitude that made him stand out, his work rate and his desire to get better, and that was what drove him to Southampton in the first place. He could have stayed at Chelsea and looked at it and tried to push Reece James, and looking at his ability, if he didn't get injured, you know, you would think he would have a decent shot at that. But he wanted to test himself, he wanted first team football, and he wanted to take that risk, and that's a really, really good sign of the kind of character that Newcastle look for in their signing. The deal is roughly around between 35 and 40 million, I believe. Could go up to 40 million. That was the stumbling block, and that's why it's taken so long. So I was told a few weeks ago that Southampton weren't going to budge on their 40 million valuation. It's around 31, 32 million straight up. Probably in instalments, but that's the first definite fee with add-ons to raise the fee as well. But Southampton have proven how difficult they are to negotiate with, as Liverpool are finding out with Romeo Lavia. So Newcastle have done really well to get this signing over the line, and I think it's a really excellent third major summer signing. With just over 3 weeks left of the window, a lot of people are wondering whether Newcastle have got any more irons in the fire, if they're going to do anything more this summer. And my information is that they are still looking for a centre-back, and at least a centre-back and possibly a left-back as well. I think left-back, a bit what I was mentioning before about the opportunism and the change of direction, I think they've kind of realised that left-back is not quite as high on their agenda as they thought initially. Daniel's asked, are the club looking for a centre-back to compete with Fabian Schär, or with similar attributes like Anderson, or somebody with recovery pace like Solé from Salzburg? I think that the reality is Newcastle are looking for added pace in this department. I think that's one thing that they've lacked, as I mentioned earlier. Newcastle were caught out in parts of last season, and certainly in pre-season teams have worked out how to exploit that high line, which worked so well when the press was so effective in the first half of the last season, particularly. A name that was mentioned to me in the spring. Again, I will stress that things have moved on obviously since then, so whether this is still one that they're monitoring, I don't know. But Jean-Clare Todibo, who was in the Seller Cup for Nice, I watched him on Saturday against Villarreal, and he was really quite impressive. He's quick, he's plays on the right side of the defence, which is another thing that Newcastle are looking at to improve on. Todibo's pace is why Newcastle are looking at him, I think, because he got himself out of a couple of dodgy situations when he was closed down, but he can still play with the ball as well. He's played the ball out a few times, nice couple of pings across the pitch. So really fits the bill in terms of not too far away from from Fabian Schär, but may have the X factor in what he lacks, if you like, to create that competition and create that difference. I think to answer Daniel's question, Joachim Andersen's also been linked, who's very much more similar to Schär in terms of attributes. I think personally this is one that I don't see as a goer. I said on the podcast yesterday on True Faith that this is one I think he's on the list and possibly an option, but I think first of all Crystal Palace would have to bring their price down for one, but also I think Newcastle are looking for that extra little bit of pace that to add to the defence, which obviously Tino Livramento brings as well, but in the centre back partner pairing with Botman. Another name is Oumar Soleil from Red Bull Salzburg. This is a player that, again, I haven't really heard too much about, haven't seen him too much, but I have chased a couple of things, and the one line that came back from me from the Austrian sort of side of things is that people expect him to be one of the next big progressions from Salzburg to Leipzig or into the Bundesliga, as you've seen with quite a few players, with Naby Keita, for example. He's quick, he can play in defensive midfield as well, so he's got that versatility. He ticks a lot of the boxes for Eddie Howe, and with that progression that's expected of him, I would imagine that he's somebody that Newcastle are definitely interested in. As I say, I think those two, Todibo and Soleil, certainly fit the bill a bit more than Joachim Andersen does in terms of what they're looking for in that centre-back profile. I think they've already got enough of the sort of slower ball-playing, more technical centre-halves in Botman and Schär, and even to a degree Dan Burn. The other question I got was from Mark Doyle, who says, are the new recruits probably based in the Premier League already? Eddie seems to prefer it this way. So this one is a really interesting question because there's a couple of reasons, there's a couple of things to say about this. Eddie Howe has really preferred Premier League proven players. If you look at Harvey Barnes and Anthony Gordon this summer, Dan Burn and Matt Targett in the first window as well. It is sort of very much a theme of Newcastle to have Premier League proven players just for that hit the ground running, and I think it comes down to this idea that Eddie Howe discussed on the weekend about players adapting to his system and it being easier to do so. And in the case of someone like Harvey Barnes, who he mentioned, it said that it's the style of play that he's used to. So I think that is definitely something to take into consideration when Newcastle are signing these players. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be from the Premier League. If you look at some of the best recruits Newcastle have made, Bruno Guimaraes and Alexander Isak both came from abroad, and Sandro Tonali this summer is expected to be a really, really good player and a really big player for Newcastle this season. All of them don't have Premier League experience, so the door isn't shut to that by any means. I just think it really shows the two-pronged attack Newcastle have had to this transfer window in terms of Steve Nixon's been the one who's driving the sort of targets from abroad, and Eddie Howe, as Mark has pointed out, does prefer Premier League proven players in a sense. But I think that the centre half might well come from abroad, just for the targets that have been linked in that profile. I think you're more likely to find a value option on in different markets, and I think that's one to watch. I don't think that the left back situation is going to be going away anytime soon. Centre half will take precedence, and I think loans will be something to watch for Newcastle towards the end of the window. As you can often see, a little bit of information that I received, Kieran Tierney was mentioned to us at the end of last season and coming into the summer as a player that Newcastle might well be interested in, and I've been told by somebody fairly close to Arsenal that he's likely to be available towards the end of the window. I wouldn't rule out a left back because I think it still is important, even if Newcastle have kind of moved on in their approach to this season from their original transfer blueprint. So thanks very much for joining me again on this video, and I really appreciate all the continued support. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Thanks.